How you doing, folks? So, Assassin's Creed Mirage, modularity and trim. Got some great breakdowns from Pitar and Cremina. And this is going to show uh, behind the scenes of some of these great breakdowns that have been posted on ArtStation in regards to the modularity and, the modularity and trim breakdown. So, there's a few notes we can learn from this, right? So, we've looked at Assassin's Creed in some of the trim stuff before, but we've not looked too much at a modular breakdown. So we'll just take in these kit pieces. And these are great because approaching environment art can be very sort of intimidating. But when you see the breakdowns of these Lego blocks that are just using trims and tilables and shaders, it can give you a lot more confidence in how you can approach, but also how much do you break down your modular kit. So one of the first things I want to bring attention to is when you have modular kits, you'll notice in a lot of these breakdowns that corners come as one sort of big piece. I don't have a whack on, so don't judge me. So they come as like half a cube, quarter of a cube together. So they don't come in as two separate pieces and then you just rotate one 45 degrees and snap it. And the reason for that is when it comes to certain angles in modularity, so corners, 45 degrees, snapping something on an angle to another angle, it's always difficult to make it snap and to get like a good result. So often, more than not, when you would design modular pieces to have a corner in so that you can transition that into another straight piece and it'll be easy like that. And when you merge things, you have control over this corner. So you can vertex blend across it. You can actually pull the verts in and out, add some shape to it. And you don't have to worry about the corner being sort of unequal. Because if you want to have a nice beveled corner and you have two separate modular pieces, what do? Do you bevel one and not the other and try and 45 degrees snap it? It gets a bit messy. So when it comes to corner pieces, I would recommend, just for ease of use, to just like these examples here, design them into their own corner piece. Same with big curved pieces. When you have a big curved piece, just have the curved piece and then modular snap it onto some straight pieces. Usually the best way to go. But yeah, we can see some great sort of breakdowns here. We've got a mixture of what looks like tilables and trim, and then floated on parts using shader tech. And that's what a lot of these environments are. A lot of environment art is simple facades and Lego blocks with lots of texture blending on as well. Like you look here, right? The corners again, all the corners are accounted for. You don't just see two flat planes that are going to snap together. So every corner is represented as its own kit because that solves a lot of issues that relate to having a kit on its corner. If you were to take this straight piece, for example, and you duplicate it and try and snap it at a 45-degree angle, it's going to look really messy. So if you are making corner pieces, merge them. I would recommend that you merge them into its own corner piece. Now, these breakdowns are great because you can just see how many corners they have. And these corners use a mixture of things, right? They use vertex painting. It looks like there's some decal work here. I believe they use photogrammetry for decals to snap onto things. But just look at the amount of corners they have, and archway pieces and door pieces and corners and pillars. This is how you make these expansive worlds for what you're doing. And at the end of the day, you're just looking at a box. You're looking at a box. There's a few segments in here. Maybe it's welded up to the top here. And these edges are, breaking the silhouette. You can see it's got a pretty chunky bevel on it. And then you can see a mixture of the brick from what looks like the vertex painting. Maybe an edge decal here, right down the edge. You kind of see some sort of pattern here that's going across the edge. If I Control Z that. Go over, Control Z, there's something happening there. So, this is a good way to figure out how your corners should be for an environment. Use research to help you engage with that. And what I like about this is a presentation piece, but this can also, by Cremina, this can also be used as a test level. So when you make these trim sheets, if you look at the actual geometry of what is on the test piece, it's just a bevel, almost like a single chamfer bevel each time, right? And then it's lofted across. And for a test level, that's great because you can just make a bunch of trim sheets, test them on these sort of, wonky edges on a cube. And if they look great and they work, you know that when it comes time to tile this onto all sorts of geometry in the world of Assassin's Creed Mirage, it's going to be very flexible. And that's the benefit of these trim sheets. Like a lot of these assets are mapped from exterior trim sheets and tileable textures. And those are going to serve many purposes, which brings me into the next side of it. The trim sheet. Here's a good trim sheet breakdown. Very complicated trim sheet. Looks like it might be a mixture of sculpting and maybe some photogrammetry base or just pure sculpting. It looks beautiful. But here is that sort of planning method we spoke about in the trim sheet video. If you can justify every row to reference, so this is a really great breakdown here, you can basically make an awesome trim sheet. So what I mean by that is a lot of people make trim sheets and happens all the time. They look at reference for the first few days and then they forget and then they make up shapes as they go. But if you use this method where you're justifying the reference to each row and you're burning that into your brain, you are going to have the best success you can, whether it's Substance Designer, ZBrush, stamping on alphas, all that sort of stuff. So when you plan your trim sheets, I recommend you find the detail you want on each row and you start blocking that in and then start sculpting it. If you need to sculpt it. I know if you're doing your trims in Substance Designer, there are ways you can add that organic wear. But if you are using ZBrush, you can sculpt some of those edges as well. And like I said, this trim sheet is used everywhere on all these sorts of pieces. And there'll be loads more trim sheets and tileables that are used everywhere. Environment art is, modules, facades, and tileables and trims for games like this. They're just everywhere. So what notes have we got? Yeah, so great way to plan trim sheets. Always burn reference into your head for it. Corners are designed as one modular piece. Same here. And the last thing I wanted to bring up is it's a good high poly practice, but if you look at some of these edges that I'm drawing attention to, you'll notice that best practice for high poly modeling with the intention of baking, avoid razor thin edges. So if you look at a lot of the edges, especially the chunkier ones, you'll notice where I trace my mouse across some of these shapes and just watch these red lines and then I Control Z it. There's a beam of light going across like every sort of bevel on the edge. It's soft, it's cushiony. You might say, oh, that's way too soft, it looks blobby. But when you're looking at it with the bake, the bitmaps from a third-person camera, with all the effects and shader work on it, you don't even see that. It reads really well in game. So you can see it here, these nice soft sort of edges. So whenever you're doing high poly modeling, it's better to have thicker edges that are, you'd say, unrealistic to a degree, because if an edge is perfectly sharp, especially in hard surface, you don't want to make it that sharp in a game. It's just not going to read well. So we always have this sort of soft pillowing effect to varying degrees. Now, it is on the extreme end here, but it works because this is big, sculpted out, stone that would have been made for this game. But even if you're doing hard surface, you want that nice beam of light. So if you're always wondering, how do I make my high poly edges good? Turn that off. How do I make my high poly edges good? You want to be able to see a beam of light around the 90-degree shapes. Now, I know there are things like Marmoset now, which has an automatic bevel baker, which that is going to get you a lot further with hard surface. However, for this sort of sculpted workflow, you take your block out, you put it into ZBrush, you divide it a few times, you do a polish on it to get the bevel, and then you start sculpting with alphas and knocking away with sort of trim dynamic as well. So with this sort of breakdown, modular pieces, corners are intended into one piece. You can use this as a breakdown of how much should I break down. Corners are very important. You can have loads of different types of corners. And when you make your trim sheet, use a reference for each row to justify what you're actually making. That will help you with the scale and being true to the reference. And when you get to the baking stage, make sure you have the beam of light around those edges and you'll be good to go. So yeah, I think there's some good practice there for all of us to learn from. Next few weeks, we'll be covering some more texture map and environment art stuff. Hopefully this helps. If you have any questions about modularity or anything like that, leave it in the comments below. For now, peace.